West Pointers are keeping a secret from us. Hey, I am Chuck the bureaucrat, and I have a little confession to make today. I got commissioned through ROTC. The truth of the matter is, I didn't even think about joining the Army until I was already in college. So to me, West Point was this vague and faraway place. And early on in my career, I cultivated a disdain for West Pointers. I know. It's completely unjustified pettiness that I outgrew a long time ago. But there's something very, very different about West Point than the rest of academia. And what's weird about it is, I didn't notice it until I was briefing general officers. I observed that a lot of general officers would take control of a briefing, particularly if it was a prep session or a one-on-one. And what they'd do is they would guide me, the action officer, to give them what they needed. They'd rehearse what they planned to say, and then they'd ask me if that was consistent with what the analysis showed. At the same time, I encountered general officers who were not like this at all. They were very passive, and they'd often ask me what they should be saying. So I kept trying to figure out what was the cause of this difference. I mean, if I'm going to go in and brief a GO, how do I predict which style are they going to use? Because these styles are dramatically different. Meanwhile, I gotta throw a little shade at the West Pointers. In fact, this is true of all military academies. If you look at a school like Duke or Notre Dame or Bucknell, certainly any of the Ivy League schools, an important metric is the percentage of their full-time faculty who have PhDs. And those schools I mentioned, they all have over 90%. But West Point, 46%. Not only is the bulk of West Point's teaching faculty freshly minted master's students who are essentially graduate teaching assistants, but most of them are only going to teach for 3 years before they head back out to the field. At first glance, that's really problematic, but what's impressive is how West Point addresses it. They use a teaching technique called the Thayer Method, which is attributed to Colonel Sylvanus Thayer, who was the superintendent of West Point from 1817 to 1833. The crux of the Thayer Method is that students are responsible for their own learning. They review the material before class, they lead the questions in class, and the instructor is just there to facilitate their learning. That's why there's a difference in the way that general officers absorb information. From the earliest stages of their learning, they were using a different technique. Listen, I went to a top-ranked engineering school, but their teaching method was distinctly lecture, homework, test. I got really good at walking into a room, absorbing information, and then regurgitating it later. So what? Well, anytime I get my hand on a room full of field-grade officers, I like to do an informal poll. I ask how many of them know what the Thayer Method is, and then I ask how many of them went to West Point. And the correlation is almost perfect. ROTC officers rarely know that the Thayer Method even exists. For a lot of officers, that's the first hurdle they have to get over. They just have to know that the Thayer Method exists. So hit the like button to make sure that this information gets spread to the officers who don't even know they need to know it. The second thing is, now that I know about this, anytime I'm going to go prep a new GO, the first thing I do is I look to see where they went to school. Now, it's not perfect because there's a lot of ROTC officers who kind of adapted their own version of the Thayer Method just out of survival needs, but it gives me a clear heads up on what to expect. You see, when you get this multi-billion-dollar decision-making machine rocking and rolling, and there's all these subtle, unspoken cultural differences, you can get tripped up and not even know why. You want another example? Check out this video about the content your boss needs from you and the way it evolves over time.